Sometimes the people we overlook the most are the ones who change our lives forever. In a world where success is measured by titles and bank accounts, where corner offices tower over humble kitchens, one woman's quiet presence would shatter everything a powerful man thought he knew about worth, family, and the invisible hands that shape our children's souls. What happens when the person you barely notice becomes the person who knows your daughter better than you do? This is not just a story about a maid and a CEO. This is a story about the spaces between us, the words we don't say, and the moment when everything we thought was solid turns to smoke. Marcus Chin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 42nd floor office, watching the city spread below him like a conquered kingdom. At 38, he had built TechVantage Solutions from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire in just 12 years. Forbes had called him the Tiger of Silicon Valley. Business Insider named him one of the top 10 CEOs under 40. His calendar was booked in 15-minute increments for the next 6 months. Every decision he made moved markets. Every word he spoke sent ripples through industries. But, standing there that Tuesday afternoon in March, watching rush-hour traffic crawl through downtown Seattle like glowing red blood cells, Marcus felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep could fix. The kind that lived in his bones. His phone buzzed. Again. It had been buzzing every 3 minutes for the past 2 hours. He glanced at the screen. 18 missed calls from his soon-to-be ex-wife, Victoria. 43 unread emails marked urgent. A calendar reminder flashing that he was already 20 minutes late for a board meeting. He silenced it all with a swipe. The door to his office opened without a knock. Only one person had that privilege. "They're waiting," said James Rodriguez, his COO, and closest thing Marcus had to a friend. James had been with him since the beginning, when TechVantage was just 2 guys in a garage with a dream and maxed-out credit cards. Now James wore custom Armani suits and drove a Tesla, but his eyes still had that same straight-shooter honesty that Marcus depended on. "Let them wait," Marcus said, not turning from the window. James walked up beside him, hands in his pockets. They stood in silence for a moment. "She called me too," James said quietly. "Victoria." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What did she want?" "To know if I could talk sense into you about the custody arrangement." "There is no arrangement. Emma stays with me." "Mark, be reasonable. You work 80-hour weeks. You travel 3 times a month. Victoria has a point." Marcus turned to face James, and his friend took an involuntary step back from the cold fury in his eyes. "Victoria has a boyfriend. She wants to move to San Francisco with him and take my daughter to play house with some tech bro who still calls himself an entrepreneur despite never having a product reach market. That's not going to happen. The lawyers say, I don't care what the lawyers say. Emma is 6 years old. She needs stability. She needs to be in her home, in her school, with her things. I'm not the one who decided to blow up this family." James raised his hands in surrender. Okay. I'm just saying, you might need to think about how this actually works. Day to day, you're not exactly home for dinner and bedtime stories. The words hit harder than James probably intended. Marcus turned back to the window. "I'm aware of my limitations," he said, his voice tight. "That's why I hired help. The nanny quit." "What?" "Yesterday. Sheila quit. Victoria told me this morning. Said something about Emma being difficult, not listening, throwing tantrums. She gave 2 days' notice and then just left." Marcus closed his eyes. That made 3 nannies in 6 months. Before that, there had been a string of au pairs, none of whom lasted more than a few weeks. Emma had gone through more caretakers than Marcus cared to count. Each one started with high hopes and ended with frustrated phone calls and abrupt resignations. "Get me another one," Marcus said. "Call the agency. Tell them I'll pay double, triple, whatever it takes." "Mark, maybe the problem isn't the nannies." "Meaning what?" James hesitated. "Meaning maybe Emma needs more than just hired help. Maybe she needs her father." The words hung in the air between them like an accusation. Marcus felt anger flash through him, hot and defensive, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like shame. "I provide for my daughter," Marcus said, his voice low. "She has everything she needs. The best schools, the best clothes, a house that most people would kill for, music lessons, art classes, a trust fund that will set her up for life. I'm building an empire that will be hers someday. Don't tell me I'm not there for her. I'm not saying you don't provide. I'm saying maybe she needs more than provision. Marcus's phone buzzed again. The board meeting. He was now 30 minutes late. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Call the agency, he said, walking past James toward the door. I need someone by tomorrow morning. He was halfway down the hall when James called after him. There might be another option. Marcus stopped but didn't turn around. My aunt knows someone, James continued. She's not from an agency. Been working privately for families for years. Older woman. Very experienced. My aunt says she's practically raised half the kids in her church community. Patient. Kind. Doesn't quit. I don't have time for informal arrangements. I need someone vetted. Background checked. References. She has all that. My aunt vouched for her personally. Says she's a miracle worker with difficult kids. Marcus turned slowly. Emma is not difficult. You just lost 3 nannies in 6 months. They stared at each other. Finally, Marcus sighed. Fine. Have your aunt send her over tomorrow. 8 a.m. I'll interview her before I leave for work. Her name is Grace Okafor. Marcus nodded and continued toward the board meeting, his mind already moving to quarterly projections and market analysis. He forgot about the conversation before he reached the elevator. That night, Marcus arrived home at 10:30. The house was dark except for the soft glow of night lights in the hallway. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay. 6,000 square feet of minimalist luxury. Heated marble floors. Smart home everything. A kitchen that featured in architectural magazines despite rarely being used for actual cooking. He kicked off his shoes in the foyer and loosened his tie as he walked through the silent rooms. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood. He found Emma's door slightly open, a sliver of light falling into the hallway. He pushed it wider and stood in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep. She looked like her mother. The same delicate features. The same light brown hair that curled at the ends. But she had his eyes. Dark. Observant. Even in sleep, her small face held a seriousness that seemed wrong for a 6-year-old. The room around her was a showpiece. Custom built-ins painted soft pink. A canopy bed with silk curtains. Shelves lined with books and educational toys, all carefully curated by an interior designer. A wall dedicated to Emma's artwork, though Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her draw. He walked in quietly and sat on the edge of her bed. She stirred but didn't wake. There was a book on her nightstand, something about a mouse and a motorcycle. He picked it up and looked at it, trying to remember if he'd read it to her. He couldn't. I'm trying, he whispered to her sleeping form. I know it doesn't feel like it, but I'm trying to build something that matters. Something that will keep you safe. Keep you from ever having to worry. Emma's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at him, disoriented. Then, recognition settled in. Daddy. Hey, baby. Go back to sleep. I'm sorry I woke you. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. You're home. Yeah. Late meeting. How was school? Okay. Just okay. She shrugged, that familiar shutting down he'd seen too many times. Miss Sheila left. I know. But we're going to find someone new. Someone really nice. I like Miss Sheila. I thought you said she was mean. She wasn't mean. She just got frustrated. I frustrate people. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke something in Marcus's chest. He reached out and touched her hair. You don't frustrate me. Emma looked at him with those serious, too old eyes. You're never here to be frustrated. The words were simple, honest, devastating. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came. What could he say? That she was wrong. She wasn't. That he would change? He didn't know if he could. That he was doing his best? His best was clearly not enough. I have a big job, he finally said, hating how weak it sounded. It's not an excuse. But it's the truth. There are a lot of people depending on me. I depend on you too, Emma said quietly. They sat in silence. The moment stretched, full of all the things Marcus didn't know how to say. Someone new is coming tomorrow, he said eventually, to help take care of you while I'm at work. Her name is Grace. Will she leave too? No. This one is going to stay. I promise. It was a promise he had no business making, but he made it anyway because he needed Emma to believe it. Needed to believe it himself. Okay, Emma said, lying back down and turning away from him. Marcus sat there for another moment, wanting to say something more, something that would bridge the gap between them. But He didn't know what that something was. So he just kissed the top of her head, turned off the light, and left. In his own room, he poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at his window looking out at the glittering city. His empire. His kingdom. From up here, it all looked so clean. So manageable. Just lights and patterns and systems that made sense. Nothing like the messy, painful confusion of real life. Of divorce and custody battles and 6-year-olds who looked at him like he was a stranger. He drank the whiskey. Poured another. Drank that too. At some point, he fell asleep in his clothes, still standing by the window, his phone clutched in his hand. The next morning came too fast. Marcus woke to his alarm at 6, showered, put on a fresh suit. Navy Tom Ford. Power tie. The armor of a man in control. He made coffee from his $1,000 espresso machine and checked email on his tablet while drinking it. At 7:45, his doorbell rang. Marcus glanced at his watch. She was early. He appreciated punctuality. It was a good start. He walked to the door and opened it, prepared to conduct a quick but thorough interview before heading to the office. What he found stopped him completely. The woman standing in his doorway was not what he expected. She was older, probably in her late 50s, with dark skin and short natural hair showing threads of gray. She wore a simple navy dress and comfortable shoes. Her face was kind but serious, with deep-set eyes that looked like they had seen a lot of life. She carried a large worn bag over one shoulder. But it wasn't her appearance that stopped Marcus. It was something else. A presence. A quiet authority that had nothing to do with power or money or position. The kind of strength that didn't need to announce itself. Mr. Chun, she said, her voice lightly accented with something Marcus couldn't quite place. African. Maybe West African. Yes. You must be Grace. Grace Okafor. James Rodriguez's aunt sent me. I'm here about the position caring for your daughter. Marcus stepped back. Please, come in. She walked into his home with the careful attention of someone who noticed everything. Her eyes moved over the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the cold perfection of the space. Beautiful home, she said, though something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Thank you. Can I get you coffee? Water? No, thank you. I'm fine. They stood in his living room, an awkward silence settling between them. Marcus realized he hadn't actually prepared for this interview. He had no list of questions, no structured approach. So, he started, falling back on business instincts. Tell me about your experience. How long have you been working with children? Grace smiled, a small patient smile that suggested she'd been through this dance many times before. 32 years, she said. I raised 3 children of my own in Lagos before coming to America. Since then, I've worked with families. Some long-term, some short-term. I've cared for infants, toddlers, school-aged children. Each one different. Each one needing something specific. I need someone reliable, Marcus said. Someone who won't quit. My daughter has been through a lot of transitions lately. Her mother and I are divorcing. The situation has been difficult for her. She needs stability. Stability is important, Grace agreed. But stability comes in many forms. Sometimes the most stable thing for a child is someone who truly sees them. Not just their behavior, but who they are underneath. Marcus frowned slightly. The statement felt pointed, though he wasn't sure why. Emma can be challenging, he said, deciding to be direct. We've had 3 nannies quit in 6 months. They all said she was difficult. Didn't listen. Threw tantrums. I need someone who can handle that. And what do you think is causing this behavior? Grace asked. The question caught Marcus off guard. I'm sorry. The tantrums. The difficulty. What do you believe is at the root of it? I don't know. The divorce, probably. Adjusting to changes. She's 6. 6-year-olds have tantrums. Grace nodded slowly. They do. But, usually for a reason. Children are not born difficult, Mr. Chun. They become difficult when something is wrong. When a need is not being met. Marcus felt defensive creeping up his spine. Emma has everything she needs. She attends the best school in Seattle. She has every toy, every opportunity. I'm sure she does, Grace interrupted gently. But children need more than things. The words echoed James's from the day before. Marcus's jaw tightened. Look, Ms. Okafor, I'm a very busy man. I need someone who can manage my household and care for my daughter while I work. I can't have someone who's going to judge my parenting or try to. I'm not judging you. Grace said, her voice calm but firm. I'm trying to understand the situation I'm walking into. Because if you want me to help your daughter, I need to know what she actually needs, not what you think she needs. They stared at each other. Marcus wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in his own home by someone he was technically interviewing. Part of him wanted to end this right now, call the agency, get someone who would simply do what they were told. But there was something in Grace's eyes, something that reminded him uncomfortably of his own grandmother, who had died when he was 12. She'd been the only person in his life who hadn't been impressed by his achievements, who'd looked right through his accomplishments to the scared kid underneath. Fine, Marcus said. What do you need to know? When is the last time you had a real conversation with Emma? Not about logistics or schedules. A real conversation. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, searched his memory. We talk every day. When I see her. When do you see her? In the mornings. Before school. And at night, when I get home. What time do you get home? It varies. Usually around 10. Sometimes later. So you see her sleeping? Not always. Sometimes she's awake. And in the mornings? Marcus felt like he was being cross-examined. I check on her before I leave. Make sure she's up and getting ready. Do you have breakfast with her? The nanny usually handles that while I'm getting ready. Do you take her to school? The driver does. I have to be at the office by 7. Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Mr. Chun, I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm here to help. But I need you to be honest with yourself. If I take this position, if I become the person caring for your daughter most of the day, every day, what exactly will my role be? Am I raising her? Or am I just managing her? The question hit like a physical blow. Marcus felt anger flash through him, defensive and hot. But underneath it was something worse. Recognition. I'm doing the best I can, he said, hating the edge of desperation in his voice. I'm a single father running a company. I can't be everywhere at once. No one is asking you to be everywhere at once. But your daughter needs you somewhere. Not just your money. Not just your name. You. Before Marcus could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy. They both turned. Emma stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair tangled from sleep. She looked between Marcus and Grace with cautious curiosity. Hey, baby, Marcus said, relief flooding through him at the interruption. This is Miss Grace. She's going to be helping take care of you. Emma walked into the room slowly, studying Grace with that intense scrutiny only children possess. Grace crouched down to Emma's level, making herself small and non-threatening. Hello, Emma, Grace said, her voice warm. It's very nice to meet you. Emma didn't respond immediately. She continued to stare at Grace, as if trying to see through her to whatever truth lay underneath. Then, quietly, almost too quietly to hear, Emma said something that made no sense to Marcus. A string of sounds he didn't recognize. Soft. Musical. Definitely not English. Grace's eyes widened. For the first time since arriving, she looked genuinely surprised. Then, impossibly, she responded. In the same strange, musical language. Her words flowed easily, naturally, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Emma's face transformed. The serious mask she'd been wearing cracked. And underneath was something Marcus hadn't seen in months. Wonder. Joy. She spoke again, faster this time, her small voice rising with excitement. Grace laughed and answered her, their conversation flowing back and forth with an ease that made Marcus feel like an outsider in his own home. What? He started, but Grace held up a hand gently, her attention still on Emma. The conversation continued for another minute. Emma was animated in a way Marcus barely recognized, her hands moving as she talked, her eyes bright. Grace listened with complete attention, nodding, asking questions, responding with warmth and interest. Finally, Grace stood up and looked at Marcus. Her expression was complicated. Surprise. Concern. Something that looked almost like sadness. Mr. Chan, she said carefully. Did you know your daughter speaks Mandarin? Marcus stared at her. What? Mandarin. Chinese. She was just speaking to me in Mandarin. Quite fluently, actually. Better than most children her age would speak any second language. Marcus looked at Emma, who had gone quiet again, her eyes moving between the two adults with that too-old wariness. That's not possible, Marcus said. She doesn't speak Mandarin. She's never had lessons. Her mother is white. I'm Chinese American, but I don't speak Mandarin. My parents immigrated when I was a baby. We only spoke English at home. Grace's expression softened with understanding. But someone has been teaching her. Someone who speaks to her regularly in Mandarin. A teacher? Someone at school. Marcus shook his head slowly, his mind racing. No. She goes to a progressive school. They do Spanish immersion, but not Mandarin. And she's only 6. She's in first grade. When would she have time to become fluent in an entire language without anyone noticing? Grace crouched back down to Emma's level. She asked her something else in Mandarin, her voice gentle and encouraging. Emma responded, her voice barely a whisper. Grace listened, then nodded. She stood up again and looked at Marcus with an expression that made his stomach drop. She says Miss Lin taught her, Grace said quietly. She says Miss Lin sings to her in Mandarin, tells her stories, reads her books, that they talk every night. Who the hell is Miss Lin? Marcus demanded. We don't have anyone named Miss Lin. We've never had a tutor named Miss Lin. I've never even heard of a Miss Lin. Emma had backed away from both of them, sensing the tension in the room. Her small face had closed off again, shutting down like a door slamming. Marcus took a breath, trying to control his rising panic. Some strange woman had been teaching his daughter Mandarin without his knowledge? How was that possible? When would it have happened? Who was this person? Emma, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. Who is Miss Lin? When do you see her? Emma looked at the floor. She comes at night, she said in English, her voice small. When everyone is sleeping. She stays with me. The room went very still. Marcus felt ice water pull. Marcus sent Emma to get dressed while he and Grace moved to the kitchen. He poured himself another cup of coffee with hands that weren't entirely steady. Grace accepted water this time and sat at the marble counter, her worn bag resting on the floor beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus stood with his back to the counter, trying to organize his thoughts into some kind of logical order. Everything felt fractured, like he'd woken up in a world where the rules had changed overnight. Tell me exactly what she said, Marcus finally demanded. In Mandarin, what did Emma say to you? Grace took a slow sip of water before answering. She greeted me. Said and I how I. Hello, Auntie. That's a respectful greeting for an older woman in Chinese culture. Then, she asked if I could speak Mandarin. I said yes, and asked where she learned. That's when she told me about Miss Lin. And what exactly did she say about this Miss Lin? That Miss Lin comes at night. That she tells her stories in Mandarin. Sings songs. Reads books. Emma said Miss Lin has taught her many things. About the Moon Festival. About dragons and phoenixes. About respect and duty and family. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Family. What did she say about family? Grace's expression was careful. She said Miss Lin tells her that family is the most important thing. That even when parents are far away, their love remains. That children must be patient and strong and remember they are not alone. The words hit Marcus like punches, each one landing in a place that already hurt. He set down his coffee cup because his hands were shaking. I need to call the police, he said. Someone is breaking into my home. Someone is accessing my daughter at night. This is kidnapping, or attempted kidnapping, or stalking, or something. Mr. Chun, Grace said gently, I don't think you need to call the police. The hell I don't. Some woman is coming into my daughter's room at night. I think Miss Lin is imaginary. The words stopped Marcus cold. He stared at Grace. What? I think Miss Lin is Emma's imaginary friend. It's very common for children, especially children going through difficult transitions. They create companions to help them process emotions they don't have other ways to express. Marcus's mind was reeling. But Emma speaks Mandarin. Fluently. You said so yourself. How does a 6-year-old become fluent in Mandarin from an imaginary friend? Grace was quiet for a long moment, her eyes thoughtful. That, she admitted, I don't have an easy answer for. What Emma spoke was real Mandarin. Good Mandarin. The kind that comes from consistent exposure and practice. Not baby talk. Not made-up words. Real vocabulary. Proper grammar. She even used tones correctly, which is incredibly difficult for non-native speakers. So someone is teaching her. Someone real. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's another explanation. Like what? Grace hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I've seen many things in my years working with children, Mr. Chun. I've learned that their inner worlds are far richer and stranger than we adults give them credit for. Sometimes children know things they shouldn't know. Sometimes they understand things we haven't taught them. There are more mysteries in a child's mind than we can easily explain. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. This was insane. All of it. He should have been at the office right now, controlling things he understood. Markets, projections, code, clean systems with predictable outcomes. So what do? He asked, and hated how lost he sounded. You let me work with her, Grace said simply. You hired me to care for your daughter. Let me do that. Let me spend time with her. Get to know her. Understand what she needs. And, in the meantime, you look into your family history. My family history. Yes. Sometimes children carry things from their ancestors. Memories. Knowledge. Gifts. Your family is Chinese. You said your parents immigrated when you were young. But, what about your grandparents? Your great-grandparents? Was there anyone in your family who spoke Mandarin? Anyone who might have had a connection to Emma before she was born? Marcus thought about his grandparents. His father's parents had died before he was born. But his mother's mother, the grandmother he'd mentioned to Emma just last night, she had lived with them until Marcus was 12. She'd been from Guangdong province. She'd spoken Cantonese and some broken English, but he couldn't remember if she'd spoken Mandarin. My grandmother, he said slowly. My mother's mother. She was from China. But she died 26 years ago. Emma never met her. What was her name? Lin, Marcus said, and felt the word drop into the room like a stone into still water. Her name was Lin Chun. Grace's eyes widened slightly. She set down her water glass. That's quite a coincidence, she said softly. It's just a coincidence. It has to be. I barely remember my grandmother. I was 12 when she died. Emma wasn't even born yet. There's no way she could know about her. Victoria, and I never talked about her. We don't have pictures up. I don't think Emma has ever heard her name. But, even as he said it, Marcus felt uncertain, felt the ground shifting under his feet. Children sometimes know things we don't tell them, Grace said. They listen. They observe. They piece together information from fragments we don't think they notice. Or perhaps your mother mentioned her to Emma. Or perhaps, my mother lives in Florida, Marcus interrupted. She hasn't visited in over a year. Before that, maybe twice a year. She and Emma aren't close. My mother never approved of my marriage to Victoria. She's barely been part of Emma's life. Grace nodded slowly. Then, perhaps we have a different kind of mystery on our hands. But, regardless of how Emma learned Mandarin, regardless of who or what Miss Lin is, the underlying truth remains the same. Your daughter is trying to tell you something. Tell me what? That she's lonely. That she needs connection. That she's reaching out in the only way she knows how. Grace leaned forward, her expression intent. Mr. Chun, children don't create imaginary friends because they're happy and fulfilled. They create them because something is missing. Emma has created Miss Lin because Miss Lin gives her something she's not getting elsewhere. The words were direct, almost brutal in their honesty. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't find the words. I provide for her, he said again, but even to his own ears, it sounded hollow. Provision is not the same as presence, Grace said. Your daughter doesn't need more things. She needs you, your time, your attention, your love, not just expressed through bank transfers and hired help, but real, present, showing up love. Before Marcus could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway, dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hair brushed but still tangled at the ends. She looked between them warily. I'm hungry, she said quietly. Grace stood up immediately. Then, let's make breakfast. Emma, can you show me where the kitchen things are? Emma nodded and walked into the kitchen. Marcus watched as Grace moved with easy competence, opening cabinets Emma pointed to, pulling out a pan, asking questions about what Emma liked to eat. Within minutes, the smell of cooking eggs filled the space. Emma sat at the counter watching, and Grace kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation. Do you like eggs scrambled or fried? Scrambled. Good choice. Me too. Do you know how to crack an egg? Emma shook her head. Would you like me to teach you? A small nod. Grace handed her an egg. Tap it gently on the counter. Not too hard. Just enough to crack the shell. Good. Now use your thumbs to pull it apart over the bowl. Perfect. You're a natural. Emma's face held the smallest hint of a smile. Marcus stood watching them, feeling like an intruder in his own kitchen. This was what mornings should look like. This easy domesticity. This connection. But He had no idea how to create it himself. Had never learned. His own childhood had been a string of high expectations and long silences. His father had worked 16-hour days at his restaurant. His mother had worked too, managing the books and inventory. Love had been expressed through sacrifice and work ethic, not conversation or quality time. He'd thought he was doing better. Thought that providing financial security and opportunity was the greatest gift he could give his daughter. But watching Emma's face light up as Grace let her stir the eggs, Marcus realized with uncomfortable clarity that he'd been wrong. "I should get to the office," he said, though it was already 9:30 and he'd canceled his meeting. "Grace, if you're willing to start today, I'd appreciate it. We can discuss salary and logistics later." Grace looked at him over her shoulder. "I'm willing. But I have conditions." Marcus raised an eyebrow. He wasn't used to people giving him conditions. Usually, it was the other way around. "What conditions?" "First, I don't just manage children. I care for them. That means I may do things differently than you're used to. I may have different rules and different approaches. You'll need to trust me." "Within reason." "Within reason," Grace agreed. "Second, I expect you to be part of Emma's life. Really part of it. I can't raise your daughter for you. I can support her, care for her, but she needs her father. That means you need to make changes." Marcus felt defensive again. "I told you, I run a company. I have responsibilities. And Emma is one of them. Your most important one. So we need to establish some non-negotiables. Dinner together at least 3 nights a week. Bedtime at least twice a week. Weekends with intentional time, not just being in the same house. Can you commit to that?" It sounded impossible. His calendar was packed. But, looking at Emma, watching her carefully spoon eggs onto plates under Grace's guidance, Marcus heard himself say, "Yes. Good. Third condition. You let me explore this situation with Miss Lynn without interference. I'll keep you informed. But you need to trust my judgment about how to handle it." Agreed. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to maintain control. But Grace was looking at him with those eyes that saw too much, and he found himself nodding. Agreed. "Then, I'll start today. Why don't you go to work? Emma and I will get to know each other." Marcus looked at his daughter, who was now eating eggs, and watching him with a careful expression. "Emma," he said, "Ms. Grace is going to be staying with us for a while. Is that okay with you?" Emma looked at Grace, then back at him. "Will you still come home?" The question broke his heart. "Of course I'll still come home. Before I'm sleeping?" He wanted to promise. Wanted to say yes, absolutely. But Grace had just made him agree to honesty. "I'll try," he said. "I'll really try." Emma nodded, accepting this truth. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was honest. That seemed to matter more than empty promises. Marcus grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. He was almost in the elevator when he heard footsteps behind him. Emma had followed him into the hallway. "Daddy," she called. He turned. She stood in the doorway of the penthouse, small and serious, Grace visible behind her in the kitchen. "Yeah, baby." She said something in Mandarin. Marcus had no idea what the words meant, but they sounded important. Formal, like something rehearsed. "I don't understand," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Emma, speak English." Her face fell. "Miss Lynn says that's how you say goodbye properly. It means may you walk carefully on your path." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. His daughter had learned goodbye in a language he didn't speak, had been taught traditions he'd never shared with her, by someone or something he didn't understand. "Goodbye, Emma," he said in English. "I'll see you tonight." He stepped into the elevator and watched her face disappear as the doors closed. All the way down 42 floors, he tried to remember the last time he'd really seen his daughter. Not just looked at her, but really seen her. He couldn't remember. At the office, Marcus went through the motions. He sat through a hastily rescheduled investor call, reviewed quarterly projections, answered emails. But his mind kept drifting back to his penthouse, to Emma and Grace, to the mystery of Miss Lynn. During lunch, he called his mother. "Marcus." Her voice held surprise. He didn't call often, usually just on holidays and her birthday. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. I just had a question about grandmother." A pause. "Your grandmother?" "What?" "I was just thinking about her. Emma is 6 now. Same age I was when grandmother came to live with us. I realized I don't remember much about her." His mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "You were very close to her." Before she got sick, she used to tell you stories, teach you characters. She tried to teach you Mandarin, though you never took to it. She spoke Mandarin? I thought she only spoke Cantonese. She spoke both. Mandarin was her first language. Cantonese she learned later from your grandfather. She always said Mandarin was the language of education, of culture. She was very proud of it. Marcus's grip tightened on his phone. What kind of stories did she tell me? Oh, the usual. Folk tales. Stories about dragons and phoenixes. The moon festival. She was very traditional. Very concerned with proper behavior and respect. She used to say that family was everything. That we carry our ancestors with us always. The words matched too closely with what Emma had said. Marcus felt a chill. Mom, did you ever talk to Emma about grandmother? Emma? Your daughter? No. Why would I? She never met her. Your grandmother died before you even met Victoria. Are there pictures? Anything Emma might have seen. I have some old photo albums in storage. But we haven't looked at those in decades. Why are you asking about this now? Marcus didn't know how to explain. Didn't want to sound crazy. No reason. Just curious. Thanks, Mom. Marcus, wait. Is Emma okay? Is this about the divorce? Emma's fine. I have to go. Talk soon. He hung up before she could ask more questions. Sat staring at his computer screen without seeing it, trying to make sense of pieces that didn't fit together. His grandmother had spoken Mandarin, had told stories about dragons and family and tradition, had died when Marcus was 12. Emma had never met her, had probably never even heard her name. Yet somehow, Emma was fluent in Mandarin and had created an imaginary friend named Miss Lin who told her the exact same kinds of stories his grandmother had told him. It was impossible. Had to be impossible. But the alternative explanations were either that someone was breaking into his home at night and teaching his daughter Mandarin, or that something stranger was happening. Something he didn't have framework to understand. His phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Emma and I are doing fine. She is showing me her room. She has many questions about Nigeria. She wants to know if I know any African languages. I told her I speak Yoruba. She is fascinated. We are having a good day. Marcus stared at the message. Emma was interested in languages. He hadn't known that. Hadn't thought to ask. What else didn't he know about his own daughter? He tried to work, but couldn't focus. Finally, at 4 in the afternoon, he gave up. Told his assistant he was leaving early. Drove home through afternoon traffic, his mind churning. When he walked into the penthouse at 5:15, he heard laughter. Genuine, unguarded laughter that he didn't immediately recognize. He followed the sound to Emma's room. The door was open. Inside, Emma and Grace sat on the floor surrounded by art supplies. Emma was painting something on a large piece of paper while Grace worked on her own creation. They were speaking in what Marcus assumed was Yoruba. Grace teaching Emma words and phrases, Emma repeating them with careful attention. He stood in the doorway watching them. This was what Emma had been missing. Not a manager, not a handler, but someone who truly engaged with her, who saw her interests and curiosity and fed them, who treated her like a person worth knowing. Daddy. Emma looked up and saw him, surprise flooding her face. You're home early. I am. Thought I'd come home and spend some time with you before dinner. Emma looked at him like he'd announced he could fly. Like the concept of him coming home early was so foreign, she didn't know how to process it. Grace stood up, brushing off her dress. Emma and I were just working on some art. She's very talented. Marcus walked into the room and knelt down beside Emma's painting. It showed 2 figures. One large, one small. They were holding hands under a sky full of stars. Above them, a third figure floated, translucent and gentle, watching over them. Who's that? Marcus asked, pointing to the floating figure. Miss Lin, Emma said simply. She watches over us. She says family protects family, even from far away. Marcus looked at the painting, at his daughter's careful work, and felt emotion well up that he didn't know how to name. Grief, longing, recognition, something ancient and painful and precious. It's beautiful, he said, and meant it. They had dinner together that night. All 3 of them. Grace cooked real food, not ordered takeout. Chicken with rice and vegetables. Simple but good. They ate at the kitchen table, and Grace asked Emma about school, about her friends, about what she liked to read. Marcus mostly listened, learning things about his daughter he'd never known. That she loved science. that her best friend was a boy named Daniel, that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up because animals were easier to understand than people. After dinner, Marcus read to Emma for the first time in months, a chapter from a book about a girl detective. Emma curled up beside him on her bed, her small body warm against his side. When he finished the chapter, she asked for another. He read 3 more before Grace appeared in the doorway. "Bedtime," Grace said gently. "We've had a big day." Emma nodded without complaint. Marcus kissed her forehead. "Will Miss Lynn come tonight?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Emma looked at him seriously. "She comes most nights. When I need her. When I'm sad or scared or lonely." "And are you any of those things tonight?" Emma considered the question. "No. Tonight I'm okay." "Good. Then, sleep well." Marcus left the room with Grace. They walked together into the kitchen where Grace began cleaning up from dinner. "Thank you," Marcus said. "For today." "For her. You don't need to thank me. This is what I do." "Still, it matters." Grace turned from the sink and looked at him. "Mr. Chun, can I speak plainly?" "Please. Your daughter is special. But she's also hurting. This thing with Miss Lynn, whatever it is, it's her way of coping with loneliness and loss. As long as she needs Miss Lynn, it means she's not getting something she needs from the real people in her life. The goal shouldn't be to take Miss Lynn away. The goal should be to fill the space so completely that Emma doesn't need her anymore. How do I do that? You show up. Consistently. You make her a priority. Not when it's convenient, but always. You let her see that she matters more than your company, more than your success, more than whatever it is you're trying to prove to the world." The words should have made him angry, but they didn't. They made him tired. Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of pretending he had it all under control. "What if I don't know how?" he asked quietly. Grace smiled. "Then, you learn. Same as anything else you've mastered. You just have to decide it's worth the effort." That night, Marcus lay in bed unable to sleep. He kept thinking about Miss Lynn, about his grandmother, about the stories she'd told him when he was Emma's age. Stories about ancestors watching over their descendants, about spirits that guided children when parents were too busy or too far away, about the invisible threads that connected family across time and distance. He'd dismissed it all as superstition when he got older, focused on rational things, provable things, built an empire on code and logic and hard data. But, lying there in the dark, he wondered if maybe he'd dismissed too much. If maybe there were truths that didn't fit into spreadsheets and algorithms. Truths about love and loss and the strange ways children navigated a world that often didn't make room for them. Around 2 in the morning, he got up and walked quietly to Emma's room. Her door was slightly open, a night light glowing softly inside. He stood in the doorway and watched her sleep. She was talking, soft murmurs in Mandarin, having a conversation with someone Marcus couldn't see. Her face was peaceful, content. Whatever she was dreaming, wherever she was in that dream, she wasn't alone. Marcus stood there for a long time, listening to his daughter speak a language he'd let slip away. A language his grandmother had tried to teach him. A language that connected him to a history he'd spent his whole adult life trying to transcend. He thought about his grandmother, about the hours she'd spent with him when he was young, the patience she'd shown, the traditions she'd tried to pass on. He'd been so focused on being American, on succeeding in this new world his parents had brought him to. He'd let everything else fall away. And now his daughter was reaching back to find it, reaching through the generations to connect with something he'd abandoned, to find the family story he'd never thought to tell her. Emma's murmuring stopped. She rolled over, still sleeping, clutching a stuffed rabbit Marcus didn't remember buying. Above her bed, the art she'd made that afternoon was taped to the wall, the 2 figures holding hands under a watchful guardian. Marcus walked into the room and sat carefully on the edge of her bed, not wanting to wake her, but needing to be close. He pulled out his phone and opened a notes app, started typing in the dark. Things I want to remember to ask Emma. What is her favorite color? What does she dream about? What makes her laugh? The next 3 weeks changed everything and nothing. Marcus tried. He genuinely tried. He came home for dinner 4 nights the first week. Made it to bedtime twice. Canceled a business trip to Los Angeles. Rearranged meetings. Delegated things he'd always insisted on handling personally. His team noticed. James pulled him aside at the end of week 1. "Are you okay?" James asked, closing the door to Marcus's office. You've canceled 5 meetings this week. The team is starting to worry. I'm fine. Just reprioritizing. Reprioritizing what? We're in the middle of the biggest expansion we've ever attempted. We need you focused. I am focused. Just not exclusively on the company anymore. James stared at him. Is this about Emma? About Grace? It's about being a father. Remember what you said? That Emma needs more than provision? You were right. Okay. But, Mark, there's a balance. You can't just abandon the company. We have investors depending on us. Employees depending on us. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm just adjusting. For the first time in 6 years, my daughter actually smiles when I come home. That matters. James sat down heavily. I'm glad. I am. But, just don't lose sight of everything you've built. Everything we've built. One person can't be everything to everyone. But, Marcus was determined to try. He read to Emma every night he was home. They ate breakfast together 3 mornings that first week. He asked questions from the list he'd started. Learned that her favorite color was purple. That she dreamed about flying. That she was afraid of thunderstorms and the dark spaces under her bed. That the boy Daniel from school sometimes made her laugh so hard juice came out of her nose. Small things. Simple things. Things any father should know about his daughter. But, to Marcus, they felt like treasure. Each new piece of information was a brick in a bridge he was trying to build between them. Grace watched this with patient approval. She'd settled into the household like she'd always been there. The kitchen felt different now. Alive. There were always good smells coming from it. Fresh bread. Soup. Real food that took time and care. Grace sang while she cooked. Old songs in Yoruba that filled the space with a warmth Marcus hadn't realized was missing. Emma thrived. The wariness that had been etched into her features began to fade. She laughed more, talked more, came running when Marcus walked through the door instead of watching him with careful distance. But Miss Lynn didn't go away. If anything, Emma talked about her more openly now. At dinner, she'd mentioned things Miss Lynn had taught her, stories Miss Lynn had told, wisdom Miss Lynn had shared. Grace handled it with calm acceptance, never suggesting it was strange or worrying. Marcus tried to do the same, though it made him uncomfortable. The Mandarin continued. Emma spoke it more frequently, often switching between languages mid-sentence without seeming to notice. Grace encouraged it, sometimes responding in Mandarin herself, sometimes asking Emma to translate, making it normal, making it part of the fabric of their daily life. Isn't this concerning? Marcus asked Grace one evening after Emma had gone to bed. They sat in the living room, Grace with her knitting, Marcus with a glass of wine he wasn't really drinking. That she has this whole relationship with someone who isn't real? Grace's needles clicked steadily. Define real. You know what I mean. Miss Lynn doesn't exist. She exists to Emma. Isn't that what matters? But it's not healthy, is it? For a child to be so attached to an imaginary person. Grace set down her knitting and looked at him. Mr. Chun, Emma is processing trauma. The divorce. The changes. The absence of consistent parenting. Miss Lynn is how she's coping. As long as she's functioning well in other areas of her life, as long as she's not withdrawing from real relationships or becoming disconnected from reality, then Miss Lynn is actually quite healthy. She's a bridge, a safe place. When Emma doesn't need her anymore, she'll fade away naturally. And when will that be? When Emma feels secure enough without her. When the real people in her life fill the spaces that Miss Lynn currently occupies. Marcus took that as both reassurance and challenge. He doubled down on his efforts. Week 2, he made it home for dinner 5 times. Attended a parent-teacher conference at Emma's school. Took her to the aquarium on Saturday. Actually spent the whole day with her, his phone turned off, just being present. They stood in front of the shark tank, Emma's small hand in his, watching the huge creatures glide through the water with terrible grace. Miss Lynn says sharks are misunderstood, Emma said, her face pressed close to the glass. She says people fear them because they don't understand them. But sharks are just doing what nature made them to do. That's very wise, Marcus said, meaning it. Whoever or whatever Miss Lynn was, she was teaching his daughter thoughtfulness, compassion, ways of seeing the world that Marcus had lost somewhere along his climb to success. Do you think I'm misunderstood? Emma asked suddenly, still watching the sharks. The question caught Marcus off guard. What? Why would you think that? The teachers at school say I'm difficult. The nanny said I was difficult. Mommy says I'm difficult. But I don't feel difficult. I just feel like me. Marcus crouched down to her level, turning her to face him. You're not difficult. You're figuring things out. That's what kids do. And anyone who says you're difficult just doesn't understand you yet. But I'm working on understanding. Okay, I'm really trying. Emma studied his face with those serious eyes. I know, she said quietly. Miss Lynn says you're trying very hard. She says it's not easy for you because nobody taught you how. The observation was so accurate it hurt. She's right. Nobody did. But that's not an excuse. I should still do better. Miss Lynn says everybody is doing the best they can with what they know. She says being angry at people for not knowing better is like being angry at a tree for not knowing how to swim. Marcus couldn't help but smile. That's a good way to think about it. They went back to watching the sharks. After a moment, Emma leaned against him, her small body warm and trusting. Marcus put his arm around her and felt something in his chest expand. Love, pure and uncomplicated. The kind of love that asks nothing and gives everything. I'm glad you're home more, Emma said softly. Me too, baby. Me too. That night, Marcus broke his own rule and brought work home. He set up his laptop at the kitchen table while Emma did homework nearby, Grace preparing dinner. He told himself he'd just check email. Just review one document. Just handle one urgent issue. 3 hours later, he was deep in a video call with the development team, discussing code architecture for a new platform they were building. Emma had finished her homework and was sitting on the couch reading. Grace had served dinner, which Marcus had eaten absently while typing responses to Slack messages. The call dragged on. Technical problems. Design conflicts. The kind of complex problem-solving that Marcus excelled at and actually enjoyed. When he finally closed the laptop, it was 9:30. Emma was already in bed. He'd missed reading to her. Missed saying goodnight properly. Missed the whole evening because he'd gotten sucked back into work mode. He walked to her room, intending to apologize. But she was already asleep, her small face peaceful in the glow of the nightlight. He stood in the doorway, frustration and guilt warring inside him. Grace appeared beside him, holding a cup of tea. It's hard, she said quietly. Changing habits. Being a different kind of person than you've been. I was doing so well. 2 whole weeks. And you still are? One night of work doesn't undo all the progress you've made. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present more often than not. About choosing her more often than not. But I promised. And you're keeping that promise. Most of the time. That's better than never. She sees the effort. Trust me. Marcus wanted to believe her. But he felt like he was failing at everything. Not present enough for Emma. Not focused enough for the company. Stretched too thin across too many obligations. The next morning, he made a point of having breakfast with Emma. Really having it. Sitting down. Asking about her day ahead. Listening to her talk about a science project they were starting at school. We get to grow plants, she said, her eyes bright. Miss Chin says we're going to learn about photosynthesis and ecosystems and how everything connects. Miss Chun, Marcus asked. Your teacher? Yeah, she's really nice. She speaks Mandarin too. Marcus set down his coffee cup. Your teacher speaks Mandarin? Uh-huh. Sometimes when the class is being loud, she'll give instructions in Mandarin to help us focus. She says switching languages helps the brain reset. And you understand her? When she speaks Mandarin? Emma nodded, spooning cereal into her mouth. Most of the time. Sometimes I have to ask her to repeat things. But usually I get it. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Emma, does Miss Chin know you speak Mandarin? Have you ever spoken to her in Mandarin? Emma shrugged. Sometimes. She seemed surprised at first. Asked where I learned. I told her Miss Lynn taught me. What did she say to that? She got a funny look on her face. Then, she asked if Miss Lynn was a tutor. I said no. That Miss Lynn was my friend. She didn't ask anything else after that. Marcus's mind was racing. A teacher. Emma's teacher spoke Mandarin and had noticed Emma's fluency. This was verifiable. Real. He pulled out his phone. Grace. He called toward the kitchen where Grace was cleaning up. I need the number for Emma's school. Grace appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. Is something wrong? I need to talk to Emma's teacher. The one who speaks Mandarin. Emma looked between them, sensing tension. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Not at all. I just want to understand something better. He called the school. Got transferred 3 times. Finally, reached the principal's office. Mr. Chun. Principal Morrison said with the carefully professional tone of someone who dealt with demanding parents regularly. How can I help you? I need to speak with Emma's teacher. Miss Chun. Mrs. Chun, yes. She's in class right now. Is this about Emma's behavior? Has there been an incident? No, nothing like that. I just have some questions about Emma's language abilities. A pause. Her language abilities? Yes. I understand Mrs. Chun speaks Mandarin. I'd like to discuss Emma's fluency with her. I can have Mrs. Chun call you during her lunch break. Around 11:30. That would be fine. Thank you. Marcus spent the morning trying to work, but mostly watching the clock. At 11:32, his phone rang with the school's number. Mr. Chun? This is Lily Chun, Emma's teacher. Her voice was young, professional, with a slight accent that confirmed she was likely a native Mandarin speaker. Mrs. Chun, thank you for calling. I have some questions about Emma, specifically about her Mandarin. Yes, Principal Morrison mentioned. I have to say, I was surprised too. Emma's Mandarin is quite advanced for someone her age. Where did she learn? That's what I'm trying to understand. Has she been taking lessons at school? Some program I'm not aware of. No, sir. We have a Spanish immersion program, but no Mandarin instruction. Emma's fluency came as a surprise to me. She understood complex instructions I gave in Mandarin during a particularly challenging class day. When I asked her about it, she mentioned someone named Miss Lin. What exactly did she say about Miss Lin? That Miss Lin tells her stories, teaches her words, helps her understand the language. I assumed it was a tutor or family member. It's not. As far as I can determine, there is no Miss Lin. Emma claims she's an imaginary friend who visits her at night. Silence on the other end. Then, I see. Mrs. Chun, in your professional opinion, how fluent is Emma? Really? Mr. Chun, I've taught Mandarin for 8 years. Emma's pronunciation is excellent. Her vocabulary is appropriate for her age. She uses proper grammar. Her tones are correct, which is extremely difficult for non-native speakers to master. She doesn't just know words. She understands context, idioms, cultural references. This isn't something you pick up from casual exposure. This is the level of fluency that comes from consistent, immersive instruction. But that's impossible. She's 6. She's never had formal instruction. There's no one in our household who speaks Mandarin except this imaginary person Emma has created. Another pause. When Mrs. Chun spoke again, her voice was careful. Mr. Chun, I don't want to overstep. But, in Chinese culture, there are beliefs about connections, about ancestors and spirits, about knowledge that passes through bloodlines. I'm not saying I believe in such things, but I was raised with these stories. And sometimes children know things they shouldn't be able to know. Are you saying you think Miss Lin is a ghost? I'm saying I don't have a rational explanation for Emma's fluency. And sometimes, the absence of rational explanation means we need to consider other possibilities. Marcus thanked her and hung up, his mind spinning. A professional educator with 8 years of experience had just told him his daughter's language skills were impossible to explain through conventional means, and had suggested, however, carefully, that supernatural explanations might be worth considering. He sat at his desk staring at nothing, trying to reconcile his worldview with what he was experiencing. He'd built his entire adult life on logic, on systems and processes, on things that could be measured and proven. The idea that something unexplainable was happening in his home, involving his daughter, made him feel unmoored. Adrift in a reality where the rules he'd relied on no longer applied. That afternoon, he left work early again, came home, and found Emma and Grace in the living room. Emma was teaching Grace a song in Mandarin. Their voices blended sweetly, Emma's high and clear, Grace's warm and rich. They didn't notice him at first. He stood in the doorway watching them, watching his daughter be effortlessly fluent in a language she shouldn't know, connected to a history he'd abandoned. When the song ended, Emma saw him and smiled. "Daddy, you're home early again." "I am. I wanted to spend time with you. Want to go for a walk? Just the two of us." Emma's face lit up. She grabbed her jacket, and they headed out. The afternoon was cool but clear, the Seattle skyline sharp against a pale blue sky. They walked to a nearby park, Emma chattering about school, about her science project, about a book Grace had been reading to her. They sat on a bench overlooking the water. Emma swung her legs, too short to reach the ground. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said carefully. About Miss Lynn? Emma stopped swinging her legs. Looked at him warily. Am I in trouble? No. I just want to understand. What is Miss Lynn like? Emma was quiet for a long moment, thinking. She's kind. She smiles a lot. She has long gray hair that she wears in a braid. She wears old-fashioned clothes, like in pictures from a long time ago. She tells really good stories. She sings songs that make me feel safe. How did you meet her? I don't remember exactly. She's just always been there. Since I was little. At first, I thought everybody had someone like her. But then, I realized other kids didn't talk about their nighttime friends, so I stopped mentioning her. Why do you think she comes to you? Emma looked out at the water, her young face thoughtful. I think she comes because I needed someone. When Mommy and you were fighting. When the nannies kept leaving. When I felt alone. She came and told me I wasn't really alone. That family is always watching. Always protecting. Even when they seemed far away. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. I'm sorry you felt alone. It's okay. I'm not alone anymore. I have Miss Lynn. And now I have Miss Grace. And you're here more. So it's better. Would you mind if I met Miss Lynn? If she comes tonight? Emma looked at him with surprise. You want to meet her? I do. If that's okay. Emma thought about it. I don't know if you can. She only comes when I'm almost sleeping. And she only talks to me. Could you ask her? Tonight? Tell her I'd like to meet her. Okay. I can ask. But she might say no. She's private. They sat in silence for a while. Marcus put his arm around his daughter, and she leaned into him. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The water reflected the colors like liquid fire. Miss Lynn says the sunset is the world showing us beauty before rest, Emma said softly. She says we should always pay attention to beautiful things because they remind us what we're fighting for. What are we fighting for? Marcus asked. Love, Emma said simply. We're always fighting to protect and preserve love. That's what makes us human. Marcus looked down at his 6-year-old daughter, wondering what strange miracle had brought such wisdom into his life. Wondering if maybe Miss Lynn, real or not, was actually the best thing that had ever happened to his family. That night, after dinner and homework and stories, after Emma was tucked in and Grace had retired to her room, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He sat in a chair in Emma's room and waited, watching his daughter sleep, waiting to see if anything would happen. At first, nothing did. Emma slept peacefully, her breath slow and even. The nightlight cast soft shadows. The house was quiet except for the usual sounds of the building settling. Then, around midnight, Emma began to murmur. Soft words in Mandarin. Having a conversation with someone Marcus couldn't see. Her face animated even in sleep, smiling, responding to things only she could hear. Marcus leaned forward, straining to understand. His Mandarin was non-existent. But the rhythm of conversation was clear. Question and answer. Story and response. The cadence of two people who knew each other well, comfortable in their communication. He watched for nearly an hour. Watched his daughter engage with this presence he couldn't perceive. And, slowly, in the dim light of the room, he began to notice something. The air around Emma seemed different. Warmer somehow. As if the space near her held a presence that was gentle and watchful. He couldn't see anything. Couldn't hear anything but Emma's quiet murmuring. But he felt something. Like standing near someone just outside your field of vision. A sense of another consciousness in the room. Patient. Ancient. Protective. I know you're there, Marcus whispered, feeling foolish but compelled to speak. I don't understand you. I don't know what you are or why you're here. But, thank you. For watching over her when I wasn't. For teaching her things I couldn't. For being what she needed when I failed to be enough. Emma's murmuring stopped for a moment. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, Emma spoke a single phrase in Mandarin, clear and distinct, though she appeared to still be sleeping. Marcus didn't understand the words. But he felt their meaning somehow. A message meant for him. Something about love and patience and the long path home. Emma settled back into deeper sleep, the conversation apparently over. The presence Marcus had felt seemed to fade, like warmth dissipating after a door closes. He sat there for a while longer, watching his daughter sleep peacefully, protected by something he couldn't understand but was learning to accept. The next morning, Emma came running into his room while he was getting dressed for work. Daddy, Miss Lynn says she met you last night. Marcus froze in the middle of buttoning his shirt. She did. Yes. She says you have a good heart. That you're trying the Mandarin classes started on a Saturday morning in late April. Marcus woke early, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first investor pitch. He'd built a billion-dollar company, negotiated deals with Fortune 500 executives, spoken at international conferences. But the thought of sitting in a classroom as a beginner, struggling with tones and characters, made his stomach tight with anxiety. Emma was thrilled when he told her over breakfast. You're really going to learn Mandarin. Her face was bright with excitement. Miss Lin will be so happy. Well, I thought it was time. If you're going to speak it, I should at least understand what you're saying. I can help you practice. Emma bounced in her seat. Miss Lin taught me so many words. I can be your study partner. Grace smiled from where she was cleaning up the kitchen. This is good, Mr. Chun. Very good. Learning your ancestral language is a way of honoring where you come from. Your grandmother would be proud. Marcus felt a pang at that. His grandmother had tried to teach him, had spent hours with him when he was young, patiently correcting his pronunciation, showing him how to write characters. But he'd been embarrassed by it, had wanted to be fully American, had pushed away anything that marked him as different. By the time she died, he'd lost almost everything she tried to give him. The class was held in a community center downtown. When Marcus walked in, he found a dozen other adults of various ages already seated. Most were young professionals, white or mixed race. A few older retirees. The teacher was a woman in her 60s named Professor Wong, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Welcome, she said when everyone had settled. I'm Professor Wong. I've been teaching Mandarin for 35 years. Some of you are here for business, some for travel, some to connect with heritage. Whatever your reason, I will tell you now that Mandarin is not an easy language. It will frustrate you. You will want to quit. But if you stick with it, if you give it real effort and real time, you will find something valuable. Not just a language, but a different way of seeing the world. The class began with basics. Tones, pronunciation, simple greetings. Marcus struggled immediately. His tongue couldn't seem to find the right positions. His ear couldn't distinguish between tones that sounded identical to him, but apparently meant completely different things. He watched other students pick things up more quickly, their younger brains more flexible, more adaptable. By the end of the 2-hour class, Marcus felt exhausted and discouraged. He'd managed hello and thank you and not much else. Everything his grandmother had tried to teach him was gone. 3 decades of disuse had erased it completely. But he came back the next Saturday. And the one after that. He practiced in his car during his commute, used language apps on his phone during lunch, made flashcards, and studied them in bed before sleeping. It was slow, painfully slow, but he kept at it. Emma became his eager practice partner. She'd test him on vocabulary, correct his pronunciation with a gentleness that reminded him of Grace. Sometimes she'd speak in Mandarin and make him try to understand before translating. It became their special thing, their shared project. Ni Jin Tiangua de Zimiyang? Emma would ask when he came home from work. Marcus would struggle to form the response. What hen mom? I was very busy. And how? Emma would clap. Your tones are getting better. The weeks turned into months. Spring became summer. The custody battle with Victoria intensified. His ex-wife was pushing hard for primary custody, claiming Marcus was never home, that Emma needed stability and consistency Victoria could provide. Marcus's lawyers pushed back, documenting the changes he'd made, the time he was spending with Emma, the stable home environment he'd created with Grace. It was ugly, expensive, emotionally draining. Marcus found himself lying awake at night, anxiety gnawing at him. What if he lost? What if a judge decided that despite his efforts, despite everything he'd changed, he still wasn't enough? What if Emma was taken away to live with Victoria and her new boyfriend in San Francisco? On those nights, he'd get up and walk to Emma's room, stand in the doorway watching her sleep. Sometimes he'd hear her murmuring in Mandarin, having her nighttime conversations with Miss Lin. Sometimes she'd sleep quietly, peacefully, no longer needing that invisible comfort as much as she used to. Grace noticed his stress. One evening after Emma was in bed, she sat him down at the kitchen table with tea. You're carrying too much, she said simply. You're trying to be everything to everyone, and it's breaking you. I don't have a choice. If I don't fight for custody, I lose Emma. Fighting for custody and carrying the weight of the world are two different things. You need to let some things go. Trust other people. You have a whole company of capable people. Let them do their jobs while you focus on what matters most. The company is what pays for everything. What provides for Emma's future. Emma doesn't need a bigger trust fund. She needs a father who isn't collapsing from exhaustion. What good is providing for her future if you destroy yourself in the present? The words stung because they were true. Marcus had been running on adrenaline and stubbornness for months. He'd cut back his hours, but was compensating by working twice as hard during the time he was at the office, skipping meals, surviving on coffee and willpower. At night, after Emma was asleep, he'd work for hours more, trying to stay on top of everything. I don't know how to do less, Marcus admitted. I don't know how to not be in control of everything. Grace reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. Then, you learn. Same as you're learning Mandarin. One small step at a time. You trust your team. You delegate. You accept that things might not be done exactly the way you do them, but they'll still get done. And you save your energy for what really matters. The next week, Marcus made changes. He promoted James to president, giving him real authority over daily operations. He cut his meeting schedule by 40%. He established firm boundaries about work emails after 7 p.m. He said no to speaking engagements, board requests, networking events that would have been valuable but weren't essential. His company didn't collapse. In fact, freed from constantly needing Marcus's input on every decision, his team became more creative, more independent. Solutions emerged that Marcus wouldn't have thought of. Innovation happened in spaces he wasn't controlling. And Marcus had more time, more energy, more presence for Emma. They developed rituals. Tuesday night was cooking night, where Emma helped Grace prepare dinner, and Marcus participated, learning to actually use his expensive kitchen. Thursday was game night. Saturday mornings were Mandarin class for Marcus, then father-daughter lunch afterward where they practiced together. Sunday afternoons were adventure time, where they'd explore different parts of Seattle. Museums, parks, markets, experiences instead of things. Emma blossomed. The serious, watchful child was still there, but now she was also joyful, playful, secure. Her teacher reported that she was excelling in school, making friends, participating in class with confidence. And Miss Lynn appeared less frequently. Emma still mentioned her sometimes, still had occasional nighttime conversations. But they were shorter now, less urgent, like someone who was gently stepping back, their job nearly complete. One night in late June, Marcus was reading to Emma before bed when she interrupted him. Daddy? Miss Lynn says she's proud of you. Marcus looked up from the book. She does. Yeah. She says you've come a long way, that you're learning to build bridges. She says your grandmother is watching and is happy too. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Tell her thank you. Tell her I'm sorry it took me so long. Emma was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant, as if listening to something Marcus couldn't hear. Then, she smiled. She says there's no need to be sorry. Every journey takes the time it takes. She says what matters is that you're walking the path now. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Marcus did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. He knelt beside his bed and prayed. Not to any specific god, just to the universe, to his grandmother, to whatever force had sent Miss Lynn to watch over his daughter when he'd been too blind to do it himself. Thank you, he whispered into the darkness. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for showing Emma she wasn't alone. Thank you for teaching her things I couldn't. Thank you for the bridge back to each other. The summer progressed. The custody hearing was scheduled for August. Marcus's lawyers were cautiously optimistic. Victoria's case had weakened. Her new boyfriend had a DUI on his record from 2 years ago. She'd missed several scheduled video calls with Emma. Meanwhile, Marcus had documented months of consistent presence, stable home environment, educational support. Mrs. Chun from Emma's school had written a letter describing Emma's flourishing development. Grace had provided testimony about the home environment. But nothing was certain. Family court was unpredictable. Judges had wide discretion. Marcus tried not to let the anxiety consume him, but it was always there, a low hum of fear beneath everything else. In late July, something unexpected happened. Marcus's mother called. It was unusual. They talked maybe once a month, brief and surface-level conversations. This time, her voice was different, urgent. Marcus, I had a dream, she said without preamble. About your grandmother. About Emma. Marcus set down the report he'd been reading. What kind of dream? Your grandmother came to me. She was young, healthy, the way she looked before the cancer. She told me Emma needed something. Something that belonged to her. Something I have in storage. Mom, it was just a dream. Was it? Marcus, I've been thinking about what you asked me months ago. About your grandmother and Mandarin and whether Emma could have known about her. And I remembered something. When your grandmother died, she left some things. A few boxes. I've had them in storage for decades. Never looked through them. She told me, at the end, to save them. That someday they might matter. I thought she meant for you. But maybe she meant for Emma. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What's in the boxes? I don't know. But, in the dream, your grandmother was very clear. She said Emma needs what's in them. That it's time. Will you come get them? Or I can ship them to you. Ship them. As soon as possible. 3 days later, 2 medium-sized cardboard boxes arrived at Marcus's penthouse. They were old, the tape yellowed, the corners worn. Marcus's mother had labeled them in faded marker. Mother Lynn's things, important. Marcus stood staring at them in his foyer for a long time, a strange reluctance holding him back. These boxes contained pieces of his grandmother's life. Things she'd deemed important enough to preserve. Things he'd been too young or too indifferent to care about when she died. Emma came home from a day at the park with Grace and immediately noticed the boxes. What are those? She asked, her curiosity sharp. They're from your great-grandmother. My grandmother. Her name was Lin Chun. These were her things. Emma's eyes went wide. Miss Lin? I don't know. Maybe. Do you want to help me open them? They sat on the living room floor, Grace watching from the kitchen doorway, as Marcus carefully cut through decades-old tape. The first box contained practical things. Old clothes, a few pieces of jade jewelry, some kitchen implements, photographs of people Marcus didn't recognize from a China he'd never known. But the second box was different. It was full of books, old books with worn covers and pages soft with age. Chinese books, poetry, philosophy, folk tales, and underneath the books, notebooks. Dozens of them, filled with handwriting Marcus didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. Emma reached for one of the notebooks, opening it carefully. Her eyes scanned the pages and widened. Daddy, she breathed. These are stories. In Mandarin. Beautiful stories. She began to read aloud, her voice taking on a rhythm and cadence that Marcus had heard before. In her nighttime murmurings. In her conversations with Miss Lin. The words flowed from her with ease and grace, bringing to life whatever his grandmother had written decades ago. Grace moved closer, kneeling beside them. What is it? Stories, Emma said, still reading. Stories about a girl who becomes a phoenix. About a boy who befriends a dragon. About the moon and the sun learning to share the sky. She looked up, tears in her eyes. These are Miss Lin's stories. The ones she tells me at night. These exact stories. Marcus took the notebook from Emma's hands, staring at his grandmother's handwriting. At stories written before he was born. Stories Emma was somehow reciting from memory. Stories she'd been hearing from Miss Lin. How is this possible? He whispered. Emma's voice was soft. Miss Lin is Grandma Lin. Your grandmother. She came to me because I needed her. Because you couldn't be there. Because I needed to know I was part of something bigger than just me and you and Mommy fighting. She taught me these stories so I'd remember. So I'd know where I come from. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He hadn't cried in years. Hadn't let himself. But now, sitting on his expensive hardwood floor surrounded by his dead grandmother's belongings, watching his daughter make impossible connections, he couldn't hold it back. Grace knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Sometimes love is stronger than death, she said quietly. Sometimes those who've left us find ways back. To protect, to teach, to remind us of who we are. They spent the rest of the evening going through the boxes. Emma read story after story, recognizing each one. Marcus held photographs of his grandmother, really looking at her face for the first time in decades. Strong features, kind eyes, long gray hair in a braid. Exactly as Emma had described Miss Lin. In one notebook, his grandmother had written messages, letters to family, instructions about traditions, recipes, wisdom she wanted to pass down. And, at the very end, dated just days before she died, a final entry. Emma read it aloud. translating to English as she went. To my grandson Marcus, if you ever read this, I know you have forgotten the old ways. Forgotten the language I tried to teach you. This is normal. Children must find their own path. But someday you may have children of your own, and they may need what you have forgotten. So I leave these stories, these traditions, this language, in hope that somehow they will find their way to the next generation, that the threads that connect us will not break, that love will find a way across time and distance and forgetting. Remember, family is not just blood. It is stories passed down. It is wisdom shared. It is the invisible bonds that hold us even when we cannot see them. May you find your way back. May you teach your children what I tried to teach you. May the bridges stand even when the builders are gone. The room was silent when Emma finished. Marcus sat with his grandmother's words echoing in his mind. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known that he would need this. That Emma would need this. She'd left breadcrumbs across decades, trusting that love would be strong enough to bring them home. I'm sorry, Grandma, Marcus said to the air, to the memories, to whatever presence might still be listening. I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry I pushed away everything you tried to give me. But I'm learning now. I'm finding my way back. Because of Emma. Because of Miss Lynn. Because of you. That night, Emma didn't have her usual nighttime conversation with Miss Lynn. Instead, she fell asleep holding one of her great-grandmother's notebooks, a smile on her peaceful face. Marcus sat in his usual chair watching her, and, for the first time in months, he didn't feel the presence in the room. Miss Lynn had served her purpose, had built the bridge she was meant to build. Now it was up to Marcus to maintain it. The custody hearing came in mid-August. Marcus walked into the courthouse with Emma's hand in his, Grace beside them for support. Victoria was already there with her lawyer and her new boyfriend. She looked polished, put together, every inch the successful marketing executive she was. The hearing took 3 hours. Both sides presented their cases. Victoria's lawyer emphasized stability, routine, the importance of a two-parent household. Marcus's lawyer countered with documentation of his presence, Emma's thriving development, the strong relationship he'd built with his daughter. But the turning point came when the judge asked to speak with Emma privately. It was unusual, but within the judge's discretion. Marcus's stomach knotted as his daughter was led into chambers with just the judge and a court-appointed child psychologist. 20 minutes later, Emma emerged, calm and composed beyond her years. She sat back down next to Marcus without saying anything. Another hour of legal arguments. Then, the judge retired to consider. Marcus sat in the hallway with Emma, Grace, and his lawyers, waiting. Every minute felt like an hour. Emma leaned against him, drawing pictures in a notebook Grace had brought. Whatever happens, Emma said quietly, not looking up from her drawing. Miss Lynn says we'll be okay. She says some things are already decided. We just have to wait for the world to catch up. Finally, they were called back in. The judge looked tired but resolute. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, she began. I've spoken with Emma. I've considered the testimony and documentation from both sides. This is not an easy decision. Both parents clearly love their daughter and want what's best for her. Marcus felt his heart hammering. However, the judge continued, my primary concern is Emma's well-being and stability. Over the past 6 months, Mr. Chun has demonstrated significant changes in his involvement with his daughter. Emma is thriving in her current environment. She has strong relationships with her father and her caregiver. She is excelling in school. Her emotional and psychological development is strong. While Ms. Brooks offers a legitimate alternative, I am not convinced that uprooting Emma from her current situation serves her best interests. Marcus felt Grace's hand grip his arm. Therefore, I am granting primary physical custody to Mr. Chun, with generous visitation rights for Ms. Brooks. This arrangement will be reviewed in 1 year to ensure it continues to serve Emma's best interests. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't process. Then, Emma was hugging him, and Grace was crying happy tears, and his lawyers were shaking his hand, and Victoria was walking out with her boyfriend without a word. In the car on the way home, Emma was quiet, looking out the window at the city passing by. Are you okay? Marcus asked. I know this is hard. Your mom is still your mom. You'll still see her. This doesn't mean, I know. Emma interrupted gently. And I do love mommy. But I'm where I need to be. Miss Lin told me this morning. She said the judge would see the truth, that I would stay with you, that this was always the path. Did she tell you anything else? Emma smiled. She said her work is almost done, that soon she won't need to come anymore, that I have you now, and Miss Grace, and all of great-grandma's stories, that I'll be okay. That night, Marcus prepared a special dinner. Grace cooked, but he helped, following her instructions, learning. Emma set the table with care, making it beautiful. They ate together, the three of them, this makeshift family that had somehow become real. After Emma went to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Grace, a cup of tea cooling between them. Thank you, he said, for everything, for seeing what Emma needed, for pushing me to be better, for staying when others quit, for believing in us. Grace smiled. You don't need to thank me. This is what I do. This is what I've always done. I help families find their way back to each other. But you're more than just help. You're part of this family now. I hope you know that. Grace's eyes were soft. I do know that. And I'm honored. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the city glittered in the darkness. But inside, in this penthouse that had once felt like a showpiece and now felt like a home, there was warmth, connection, love. Marcus thought about his grandmother, about Miss Lin, about the strange and wonderful way she'd reached across death itself to protect her great-granddaughter, to teach her, to bring Marcus home to himself and to his heritage. He didn't understand it, probably never would, but he didn't need to understand. He just needed to honor it. The next Saturday, Marcus went to his Mandarin class. Professor Wang was teaching them a poem, an old Chinese poem about rivers and journeys and finding your way home. Marcus struggled with the tones, but he kept trying, kept practicing, kept building that bridge back to the language his grandmother had loved. That afternoon, he picked up Emma from her art class, and they had their usual lunch together. They practiced Mandarin. Emma corrected his pronunciation with gentle patience. They laughed at his mistakes, made plans for an adventure the next day. Walking back to the car, Emma slipped her hand into his. Daddy? Miss Lin came to say goodbye last night. Marcus stopped walking. She did. Yeah. She said her job was done. That you and I are connected now. That I don't need her to protect me anymore because I have you. She said she's proud of both of us. That Grandma Lin is always watching, but from further away now. That she'll always be part of our stories, but it's time for us to write new ones. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, looking into her serious, beautiful face. How do you feel about that? Emma thought about it. Sad, but also okay. She's not really gone. She's just part of the air now, part of the language, part of the stories we read together. She's in all the places we look for her. Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug, holding her tight. You are so wise, so strong. I'm lucky to be your dad. I'm lucky too. Emma whispered into his shoulder. Lucky you found your way back. They drove home as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Marcus thought about bridges and journeys, about walls that become bridges when you're willing to change them, about the long path home, and the strange guides who sometimes appear to light the way. He thought about his grandmother, about Miss Lin, about the invisible bonds that held families together across time and distance and forgetting, about love that was stronger than death, more persistent than absence, more powerful than all the walls he'd built. And he thought about the future, about continuing to learn Mandarin, about reading his grandmother's stories with Emma, about honoring traditions he'd abandoned and creating new ones they could share, about showing up, being present, building something that would last beyond quarterly earnings and board meetings and all the markers of success he'd once thought mattered most. That evening, as Emma got ready for bed, she pulled out one of her great-grandmother's notebooks. Will you read to me tonight? She asked Marcus. In Mandarin? I can help if you get stuck. Marcus took the worn notebook, looking at his grandmother's careful characters. His reading was slow, halting. Emma had to help him with pronunciation, with meanings, with the flow of the story. But they worked through it together, father and daughter, bridging the gap between what was forgotten and what could be remembered. When the story ended, Marcus closed the notebook. That was beautiful, he said. All of Grandma Lin's stories are beautiful, Emma agreed. That's why Miss Lin shared them. So we'd remember. So we'd know where we come from. Marcus tucked Emma in, kissing her forehead. Wan on, he said in careful Mandarin. Good night. 6 months later, winter came to Seattle. The city transformed under a rare heavy snowfall. The streets quiet and muffled, everything softened and made new. Marcus stood at his office window watching the snow fall, but, unlike before, he wasn't staying late. It was 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and he was packing up to go home. Leaving already? James appeared in the doorway, a knowing smile on his face. That's 3 days in a row you've left before 5. Should I be concerned about your dedication? Marcus laughed. My dedication has just been redirected. Emma has a school performance tonight. Some kind of cultural celebration. She's been practicing for weeks. The famous Emma, who speaks Mandarin. How is she? Incredible. Happy. Thriving. She's testing at the top of her class and everything. Her teacher says she's a natural leader. Other kids gravitate toward her. James leaned against the doorframe. And you? How are you handling this new balanced life? Marcus considered the question. 6 months ago, he would have said he was barely holding it together, that trying to be everything to everyone was breaking him. But something had shifted. Not overnight. Gradually. Like ice melting or seasons changing. So slowly you barely noticed until suddenly, everything was different. I'm good, Marcus said, and meant it. Actually good. The company is doing better than ever. The team is more creative and independent. And I get to have dinner with my daughter 5 nights a week. Read her to sleep. Help with homework. Be part of her life. I don't know why I thought I had to choose between being successful and being present. Turns out you can do both if you're willing to let go of control. That's growth, James said. I'm proud of you, man. You've changed a lot in the past year. I had good teachers. Marcus made it home by 5:15, the drive through snowy streets slower than usual. The penthouse had transformed too over the past months. It was still beautiful, still expensive, but now it felt lived in. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. Grace's herbs grew in pots on the windowsill. There were books everywhere, in multiple languages. Photographs on the walls, showing real moments instead of designer aesthetics. The space had a soul now. Grace was in the kitchen cooking dumplings with Emma. The smell was incredible. Emma's hands were covered in flour as she carefully folded dumpling wrappers under Grace's patient guidance. Daddy. Emma looked up, her face bright. You're home. We're making jiaozi for the performance tonight. Grace is teaching me the traditional way. Marcus kissed the top of her flour-dusted head. They look perfect. Did you practice your part? 3 times. I know all my lines. Grace helped me with the harder pronunciations. Emma went back to folding, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. Grace smiled at Marcus. She's been working very hard. Very dedicated to getting everything right. She wants to honor the culture properly. She learned that from you, Marcus said. Both of you. The school performance was at 7. By 6:30, they were all dressed and ready. Emma wore a traditional Chinese dress, a qipao that Marcus's mother had sent from Florida. It was red with gold embroidery, beautiful and formal. Emma kept admiring herself in the mirror, spinning to make the fabric swirl. Great-Grandma Lin wore dresses like this, Emma said. I saw pictures in her notebooks. She would be proud, wouldn't she? She would be incredibly proud, Marcus assured her. I wish she could see you. Maybe she can, Emma said simply. Just because we can't see her doesn't mean she's not watching. They arrived at the school to find the auditorium packed with families. Marcus found seats near the front with Grace beside him. The program explained that the students would be performing various cultural presentations, showcasing the diversity of their school community. Emma's class was doing a presentation on Chinese New Year traditions. The lights dimmed. Various classes took their turns. African dance, Irish music, Mexican folk tales. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause from proud parents. Then, Emma's class took the stage. 21st graders in various traditional Asian dress. Mrs. Chun, Emma's teacher, stood to the side with a guzheng, a traditional Chinese instrument. She began to play, the music delicate and haunting. Emma stepped forward. She was one of 5 students chosen to speak. Marcus held his breath as his daughter stood in the spotlight, poised and confident. She began to speak in Mandarin. Clear, fluent. Her tone's perfect. She explained the significance of Chinese New Year, the traditions of red envelopes and dragon dances, the importance of family gathering, the concept of renewal and new beginnings. Her words flowed with a grace and understanding that seemed beyond her years. Then, She transitioned to English, making sure everyone could understand. In Chinese culture, we honor our ancestors. We remember those who came before us. We carry their wisdom and their stories forward. My great-grandmother came to America many years ago. She brought these traditions with her. She tried to pass them to her grandson, my father. And now, through her love and her stories, they've been passed to me. This is the gift of family. This is the bridge between generations. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. Beside him, Grace had her hand over her mouth, her own eyes wet. On stage, Emma glowed with confidence and purpose. Other children joined her, performing a traditional dance. The music swelled. The audience watched in rapt attention. When the performance ended, the applause was thunderous. Parents stood. Children on stage beamed with pride. Mrs. Chun bowed to the audience, then to her students. Marcus found Emma afterward in the crowded hallway. She ran to him, and he swept her up, not caring that she was getting too big to carry, not caring about the tears on his face. "You were magnificent," he said into her hair. "Absolutely magnificent. Great-Grandma Lin would have been so proud. I'm so proud. Did I do the tones right? I practiced so much with Miss Grace. Every single tone was perfect. Your Mandarin is better than mine will ever be. That's okay, Baba. You're still learning. Miss Lin says learning never stops. That we're always becoming." Other parents stopped to congratulate Emma. Mrs. Chun approached, smiling warmly. "Mr. Chun, your daughter is exceptional. Her understanding of the language and culture is remarkable. I hope you'll continue to nurture this gift." "I will. We both will. It's part of who we are now." They drove home through the snowy streets, Emma chattering about the performance, about her classmates, about everything. Grace listened with quiet joy, interjecting questions that showed she truly cared about Emma's experience. Back at the penthouse, they had the dumplings Grace and Emma had made. They were perfect, delicate, and flavorful. Marcus had learned to cook in the past months too, but Grace and Emma were the real masters. He was content to be the student, learning from them just as he was learning Mandarin. After dinner, Emma asked if they could read from her great-grandmother's notebooks. It had become their nightly ritual. Marcus's Mandarin had improved significantly. He could now read entire stories with only occasional help from Emma. They'd worked through half the notebooks, discovering folk tales and personal reflections and wisdom that felt timeless. Tonight's story was about a pine tree that stood alone on a mountain. The tree weathered storms and seasons, bending but never breaking. Other trees around it fell, but the pine remained. Not because it was stronger, but because it had learned to be flexible, to adapt, to bend with the wind instead of resisting it. "What do you think the story means?" Marcus asked Emma after they finished. Emma thought carefully. "I think it means that being strong doesn't mean being hard. It means being able to change when you need to. Like you, Baba. You were hard like a wall. But then you learned to be flexible like the tree. And now you're still strong, but in a different way." Marcus marveled at his daughter's insight. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You just weren't paying attention before." It was true. It was absolutely true. Emma had always been this thoughtful, this perceptive. Marcus had just been too busy, too distracted, too focused on his own priorities to notice. "You're right," he admitted. "I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry for that. It's okay. You're paying attention now. That's what matters." After Emma was tucked in and sleeping peacefully, Marcus found Grace in the kitchen preparing tea. She moved through the space with the ease. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. Marcus thought about the year that had passed, about Miss Lin and her nightly visits, about discovering his grandmother's notebooks, about custody battles and Mandarin classes and learning to be a father. "Grace," he said quietly, "do you believe in ghosts? In spirits?" Grace took a slow sip of tea before answering. "I believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe. More powerful than death. More powerful than time. I believe that those who love us continue to watch over us in ways we may not understand. Whether you call that spirits or ancestors or simply the continuation of love's energy, I don't know. But I believe it's real." Miss Lin hasn't appeared in months. Emma says her work is done, but sometimes I feel something. A presence. Like someone is still watching. Still approving. Your grandmother's love didn't end when she died. It continued through the stories she wrote, through the traditions she preserved, through the language she protected. That love reached across decades to teach Emma what you'd forgotten, to bring you both home to your heritage. That's not a ghost, Mr. Chun. That's family. That's the invisible thread that connects us all. Marcus nodded slowly. I'm going to China next summer. Taking Emma. I want her to see where her great-grandmother came from. Want to walk the streets she walked. Visit the places in her stories. Make it real for Emma. For myself. That's beautiful. Emma will treasure that. Will you come with us? As part of the family, not as an employee. We couldn't do this without you. Grace's eyes shone. I would be honored. The weeks passed. Winter deepened. Marcus continued his Mandarin classes, now advancing to intermediate level. He practiced daily with Emma, their conversations mixing English and Mandarin naturally. He'd found a tutor who met with them both on Saturday afternoons, helping Marcus catch up to his daughter's level. The company continued to thrive. Marcus had found balance, delegating effectively while still maintaining strategic oversight. He'd proven that you could be a good CEO and a present father. That success didn't require sacrifice of everything else. That boundaries and priorities made you stronger, not weaker. Victoria had visitation every other weekend and 2 weeks in the summer. The transitions were sometimes difficult, but Emma handled them with remarkable grace. She loved both her parents, navigated both households. The anger and confusion that had once defined her had been replaced with security and confidence. One Saturday in February, Marcus was at his Mandarin class when Professor Wong asked him to stay after. He waited as other students filed out, wondering if he'd done something wrong. Mr. Chun, Professor Wong said when they were alone, I wanted to speak with you about your progress. When you started this class, you struggled. Everything was difficult. You seemed overwhelmed. Marcus braced himself for criticism. But you kept coming, she continued. Week after week. You practiced. You studied. You didn't give up even when it was hard. And now, 6 months later, you're one of my best students. Your pronunciation is excellent. Your comprehension is strong. You're not just learning a language. You're reclaiming a heritage. That takes courage. Marcus felt unexpected emotion rise in his throat. I'm learning it from my daughter, so I can read her stories in the language they were meant to be read in. Professor Wong smiled. The best motivation is always love. I wanted you to know that your grandmother would be proud. What you're doing honors her memory, honors your family. That matters more than perfect grammar. That afternoon, Marcus picked up Emma from her art class, and they went for their usual lunch. They'd found a small Chinese restaurant run by an elderly couple from Guangdong. The owners had taken a special interest in Emma, teaching her Cantonese phrases, telling her stories about their own grandparents. Ni hao, Emma. Mrs. Wong greeted them warmly. Ni hao, Mr. Chun. The usual. Sure da, Marcus responded. Yes. His Mandarin was now good enough for basic conversations. They settled into their regular booth. Emma ordered in Mandarin, Marcus adding his order with only slight hesitation. Mrs. Wong beamed at them both. Your daughter's Mandarin is exceptional, she said to Marcus in English. And yours is improving quickly. You're giving her a great gift. Language is connection. To culture. To family. To history. As they ate, Emma talked about a project she was doing at school about family trees. She'd interviewed Marcus about his parents and grandparents. Had spoken with his mother on video call. Was creating a chart that showed where everyone came from. I wish I could have known great-grandma Lin, Emma said, carefully using her chopsticks to pick up noodles. But, in a way, I feel like I did know her. Through Miss Lin, through her stories, through everything she left behind. You did know her, Marcus said. Maybe not the way most people know their great-grandparents. But you knew her heart, her values, her wisdom. That's more important than having met her in person. Do you think she knew about me? Before she died. Marcus thought about it. She died before I even met your mother. So no, she couldn't have known you specifically. But I think she hoped. I think she believed that her stories and her language would matter to someone someday. That her grandchildren or great-grandchildren would need what she was preserving. So in a way, yes. She knew you. She knew there would be someone like you who needed her. Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. I want to be like her when I grow up. Not just speaking Mandarin, but being someone who helps people remember, who builds bridges, who takes care of family. You already are like her. Every day. That evening, Marcus got a call from James. There was a crisis at the company. A major client threatening to pull out. A technical failure that could cost millions. The kind of emergency that, a year ago, would have consumed Marcus completely. Would have kept him at the office until midnight or later. I'll handle it, James said. But I wanted you to know. Marcus looked at Emma, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, Grace helping her with math problems. Keep me updated, Marcus said. But, yes, handle it. That's why you're president. Trust your judgment. Call me if you absolutely need me. But, otherwise, I trust you. He hung up and went to help Emma with her homework. The crisis at work felt distant. Important, but not more important than this moment. Not more important than being present for his daughter. The crisis resolved itself by the next morning. James had handled it brilliantly, negotiating a solution Marcus probably wouldn't have thought of. The client stayed. The technical issue was fixed. The company was fine. Better than fine. Marcus realized with startling clarity that his company didn't need him to micromanage every detail. It needed him for strategy and vision and leadership. But the day-to-day, his team was more than capable. He'd built something strong enough to stand without him propping it up constantly. In March, Marcus received an unexpected letter. It was from a university in China, inviting him to speak at a conference about technology and cultural preservation. They'd heard about his work learning Mandarin, about his daughter's fluency, about his efforts to reclaim his heritage. They wanted him to speak about balancing modern business with traditional values. He almost declined. International travel, time away from Emma, the complications of managing everything. But then, he thought about it differently. This could be part of their trip to China. Emma could come. They could turn it into an educational journey. Visit his grandmother's hometown. Meet distant relatives. Make his heritage real and tangible. He accepted on the condition that it be scheduled during summer break and that his daughter could accompany him. The months flew by. Spring came to Seattle, bringing cherry blossoms and longer days. Emma finished first grade with straight A's and glowing reports from her teacher. She'd been invited to participate in a gifted program for second grade. Her Mandarin continued to improve. Her art showed remarkable talent. She'd made a dozen close friends at school. The custody arrangement was working well. Emma spent most of her time with Marcus, but visited Victoria regularly. The tension between Marcus and his ex-wife had eased. They'd learned to co-parent with civility, if not friendship. Victoria had even complimented Marcus on how well Emma was doing, admitting that maybe the current arrangement was best for everyone. In June, they prepared for China. Marcus had connected with distant relatives in Guangdong province, his grandmother's family. They'd invited Marcus and Emma to visit, to stay with them, to see where the Lin family came from. Marcus's mother was flying from Florida to join them for part of the trip. Emma was beside herself with excitement. She'd been studying maps, learning about Chinese geography, practicing more formal Mandarin appropriate for meeting elders. Grace had helped her understand Chinese customs about respect and family obligations. The night before they left, Emma couldn't sleep. Marcus found her in her room, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "I keep thinking about great-grandma Lin. About seeing her home. About meeting her family. What if they don't like me? What if I mess up and say the wrong thing?" Marcus sat beside her on the bed. "They're going to love you. You're part of them. You carry their blood, their history, their language. You honor them just by existing. I wish Miss Lin could come. In a way, she will. She's part of you now. Part of the language you speak. The stories you know. The values you carry. You're bringing her home, Emma." Completing a circle she started decades ago. Emma leaned against him. "Are you scared?" "About going back?" "A little," Marcus admitted. "I've spent most of my life running away from this. Trying to be fully American. Fully assimilated. Going back feels like admitting I was wrong. That I lost something important. But you found it again. That's what matters. I found it because of you. Because you needed it. Because somehow, my grandmother reached across death itself to teach you what I'd forgotten. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." They sat together in the quiet room, watching the city lights. After a while, Emma spoke softly. "Daddy, Miss Lin came to me tonight. Just for a moment. Just to say goodbye before the trip. She said she's proud of us. She said the bridge is strong now. She said we'll always be connected, but we don't need her to maintain that connection anymore. We have each other. We have the language. We have the stories. We have family. Marcus felt that familiar presence, gentle and warm. Tell her thank you. Tell her we'll honor everything she taught you, everything she preserved. She knows. She says love always knows. They flew to China on a warm June afternoon. The flight was long, but Emma stayed engaged, reading books about Chinese history, practicing her Mandarin, asking Grace and Marcus questions about everything. When they landed in Guangzhou, Marcus felt something shift inside him, like a door opening, like coming home to a place he'd never really left. His mother met them at the airport, tears streaming down her face. She'd changed in the years since he'd last seen her. Older, but also somehow softer. She embraced Emma first, speaking to her in broken Mandarin that Emma graciously understood. Then, she turned to Marcus. Your father would have been so proud, she said, seeing you return, seeing Emma embrace her heritage. This is what he always wanted for you. They spent 2 weeks in China, visited his grandmother's childhood home, now transformed but still recognizably the place from photographs. Met cousins and second cousins and relatives so distant Marcus lost track of the connections. But Emma remembered everyone, learned their names, spoke to them in Mandarin that made them weep with joy. The conference speech went well. Marcus talked about balancing innovation with tradition, about the importance of cultural preservation in an increasingly globalized world, about how his grandmother's love had reached across decades to teach his daughter, about building bridges between generations and cultures. The audience gave him a standing ovation. But the real impact of the trip came in quieter moments. Walking through a temple where his grandmother had worshipped as a girl, reading her stories aloud to relatives who remembered her, watching Emma connect with family she'd never met but who welcomed her completely, eating meals prepared from recipes his grandmother had written in her notebooks, understanding, finally, where he came from and what that meant. On their last night in China, they visited a small Buddhist temple outside the city. The monks there had known his grandmother's family for generations. An elderly monk approached them, speaking in Mandarin so formal Emma had to concentrate to understand. Your grandmother visits here still, the monk said. Not in body, but in spirit. She prays for her family, asks that they remember, that they carry forward what matters. She is happy tonight. Her prayers have been answered. Whether the monk actually believed this or was simply offering comfort to visiting family, Marcus didn't know. But, standing in that ancient temple, incense smoke curling toward the sky, he felt something. Peace. Completion. The sense that some circle had finally closed. That some debt had been paid. That some promise had been fulfilled. They flew home to Seattle with suitcases full of gifts and photographs and memories. Emma talked nonstop about everything they'd seen and done. Grace listened with patient interest, asking questions that helped Emma process the experience. Marcus's mother came with them, planning to stay for a month, finally, ready to be the grandmother Emma deserved. The penthouse felt different when they returned. It had been transformed in their absence. Marcus had hired a designer to create a special room, a room dedicated to his grandmother's memory. Her notebooks lined shelves. Her photographs hung on walls. A desk held calligraphy supplies. It was a space for Emma to study, to connect with her heritage, to remember where she came from. Emma cried when she saw it. Happy tears. Grateful tears. She walked around the room, touching everything gently, reverently. This is perfect, she whispered. Great-Grandma Lin would love this. Miss Lin would love this. That night, they had a welcome-home dinner. Grace cooked Emma's favorites. Marcus's mother shared stories about her own childhood, stories Marcus had never heard. They looked through photographs from the trip, reliving favorite moments. After dinner, Emma asked if they could read from the notebooks. They went to the new room, all of them, and Marcus read in Mandarin while Emma and his mother listened. His pronunciation was better now, his understanding deeper. He could feel the stories in a way he couldn't before, could sense his grandmother's voice in the words, her wisdom, her love. When the story ended, Emma said quietly, Miss Lin is here. She's listening. She's happy. Marcus felt it too. That gentle presence. Watching. Approving. Not staying, but visiting. Not guiding, but witnessing. The job was done. The bridge was built. The connection was secure. Miss Lin could rest now, could fade back into whatever realm she'd come from, knowing her family was whole again. Over the following months, life settled into a new rhythm. School started. Emma began second grade and the gifted program. She joined a Mandarin language club, started teaching basic Mandarin to other interested students, became a bridge herself between cultures. Marcus continued his classes, now at advanced level. He joined a Chinese business network, making connections with other Chinese American professionals, was exploring ways TechVantage could partner with companies in China. His heritage, once a source of shame or indifference, had become an asset, a strength, a source of pride. Grace remained with them, now officially part of the family in every way that mattered. She'd started teaching Yoruba to Emma, expanding her language skills even further. The penthouse was alive with multiple languages, multiple cultures, multiple traditions, all woven together. Marcus's mother visited regularly. The relationship between them had deepened. She'd opened up about her own struggles with immigration, with losing her mother, with trying to balance American and Chinese identity. Marcus finally understood her in ways he'd never allowed himself to before. The one-year custody review came and went smoothly. The judge noted Emma's continued thriving, Marcus's sustained involvement, the stability of the home environment. Primary custody remained with Marcus. Victoria had started to build her own life in San Francisco. She loved Emma but had accepted that this arrangement was best. On a cold December evening, nearly 2 years after Grace had first walked into their lives, Marcus sat in his grandmother's room with Emma. They were preparing for Chinese New Year, which would fall in January. Emma wanted to host a celebration, invite all her relatives, honor the traditions properly. "Can I read tonight?" Emma asked, reaching for one of the notebooks. Of course. She selected one of the final notebooks, one they hadn't gotten to yet. Opened it carefully. Her eyes scanned the pages and then stopped. Her expression changed, became very still. "Daddy," she said softly, "this one is different. This one it's a letter. To you. Specifically to you." Marcus felt his heart begin to pound. "Read it." Emma's voice was gentle as she translated from Mandarin to English. "To my grandson Marcus, if you are reading this, then my prayers have been answered. Then, somehow, against all odds, my words have found you. Or perhaps they found your children. Or your children's children. Love finds a way, even across death and time and forgetting. Marcus, I know you have struggled. I know you pushed away the old ways to embrace the new. This is not wrong. Each generation must find its own path. But I hope that someday, you or your children would need what I tried to preserve. Would need the language, the stories, the connection to who we are and where we came from. If you are reading this, then you have learned Mandarin again. Then you have remembered. Then the bridge I tried to build has held. This fills me with more joy than you can imagine. I want you to know, I never blamed you for forgetting. I understood. America is seductive. Success is seductive. The new is always more appealing than the old. But the old holds wisdom the new cannot replicate. The old holds roots that the new needs to grow strong. You were always meant for great things. Even as a small boy, I saw your intelligence, your drive, your determination. I knew you would achieve much. I prayed that you would also remember who you are. That success would not cost you your soul. If you have children, love them completely. Be present for them in ways work and duty may make difficult. They need your time more than your money, your attention more than your achievements. Teach them where they come from. Tell them stories. Build bridges between the old world and the new. This is the most important work you will ever do. I will watch over you always. If I can, I will guide your children. I will be the bridge when you forget how to build bridges yourself. This is my promise. This is my gift. This is my love. May you walk carefully on your path. May you build well. May you remember. May you pass forward what matters most. With all my love, your grandmother, Lin Chun. Emma finished reading, and the room was silent. Marcus sat with tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. His grandmother had known. She'd seen his future somehow, had written him a letter across death, across time, trusting it would find him when he needed it. She kept her promise, Emma said softly. She watched over me. She guided me. She was the bridge. And now we can build our own bridges, just like she wanted. Marcus pulled Emma into his arms, holding her tight. This child who had saved him. This daughter who had brought him home. This miracle wrapped in a 6-year-old's body who spoke Mandarin taught by a ghost and carried the wisdom of generations. I promise, Marcus said, speaking to Emma, to his grandmother's memory, to Miss Lin, to everyone who had helped them find their way. I promised to remember, to teach, to pass forward what matters, to build bridges, to honor the love that held us even when we couldn't see it. Emma hugged him back, fierce and strong. I know, Baba. I know. That Chinese New Year, they hosted a celebration that filled the penthouse with life and laughter. Family came from everywhere. Marcus's mother, his cousins, Emma's classmates and their families, Grace's church community, James and his family, Mrs. Chun from Emma's school, the elderly couple from the Chinese restaurant, all the people who had become part of their story. They hung red lanterns, made dumplings together, shared stories in multiple languages. Emma performed a traditional dance she'd learned from relatives in China. Marcus gave red envelopes to all the children. Grace taught everyone a Yoruba blessing. The cultures wove together, creating something new and beautiful. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Emma found Marcus standing by the window, looking out at the city sparkling in the winter night. Happy? She asked, slipping her hand into his. Incredibly happy. Yeah. This is what great-grandma wanted, isn't it? Everyone together, remembering, celebrating, building bridges. This is exactly what she wanted. Do you think she's watching? Marcus looked down at his daughter, this wise old soul in a young body, and smiled. I know she is. She's always watching, always proud, always loving us from wherever she is. They stood together at the window, father and daughter, watching the city lights and feeling the presence of all who had come before them and all who would come after. The threads that connected them, the bridges that held strong, the love that was stronger than death, more persistent than time, more powerful than forgetting. In the morning, life would continue. Marcus would go to work. Emma would go to school. Grace would manage the household. The ordinary would resume. But it would be different now. Intentional, connected, rooted in something deeper than success or achievement or any external measure of worth. They had each other. They had their heritage. They had their stories and their language and their traditions. They had bridges that spanned generations. They had love that had refused to let them go. And somewhere in the fabric of the universe, in the space between what we can see and what we can only feel, Miss Lin smiled. Her work was done. The bridge was strong. The family was whole. Love had won, as it always does when given enough time and enough faith and enough willingness to remember what matters most. The thread had held. The circle was complete. The story that began with a grandmother's love and a maid's whisper in Mandarin had become something lasting, something true, something that would be passed forward to the next generation and the next and the next, as long as someone remembered to tell the stories and speak the language and build the bridges. And they would remember. Marcus would make sure of it. Emma would carry it forward. And someday, when they were old and their own time came to pass on, perhaps they too would find a way to reach back across death to guide whoever needed guiding, to love whoever needed loving, to build bridges for whoever had forgotten how. This was the promise. This was the gift. This was the unbroken thread that connected them all, stretching back through time and forward into futures they couldn't see but could trust would hold. The city sparkled below them. The night was cold, but inside was warm. Emma leaned against her father, safe and loved and whole. Marcus held his daughter close, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them here, for the grandmother who had never given up, for the maid who had seen what was needed, for the mysterious Miss Lin who had built the bridge home, for love, which always finds a way, for family, which never truly ends, for bridges that hold strong, even when we can't see them, even when we've forgotten how to build them ourselves, for the threads that connect us all, invisible but unbreakable, ancient but ever new, guiding us home even when we're lost, reminding us who we are even when we've forgotten. This was the story. This was the truth. This was the gift that kept giving generation after generation, as long as someone was willing to receive it. And they were willing. Finally, gratefully, completely willing. The bridge was built. The path was clear. Love had won. And that made all the difference. "One on, Baba," Emma replied. "Good night, father." He left her door slightly open, the nightlight glowing softly, walked to his own room, and stood at his window looking out at the city. His empire, his kingdom, still there. still successful, but no longer the only thing that defined him. Somewhere in the darkness, he felt a presence. Gentle, approving, fading but not gone. His grandmother, watching. Miss Lin, her work complete. The invisible threads that connected them all, holding strong. Marcus raised his hand to the window, a gesture of acknowledgement, of thanks, of goodbye and hello and everything in between. Then, he turned from the window, closed his curtains, and went to bed in a home that finally felt like home. To find your way back. She says it's hard for you because you learned to build walls instead of bridges. But walls can become bridges if we're willing to change them. That's very profound. Miss Lin is very wise. She says she'll keep watching over me, but she's glad I have you and Miss Grace now. She says soon I won't need her as much. That's okay. She says that's what's supposed to happen. Children are supposed to grow up and not need the old stories anymore. Emma spoke matter-of-factly, already moving on to other thoughts, asking what he wanted for breakfast. But Marcus stood there, shirt half-buttoned, feeling like he'd just been given a message from across time. From his grandmother, from his heritage, from some part of himself he'd lost, and was only now beginning to find again. That evening, he came home at 6, had dinner with Emma and Grace, read 3 chapters of Emma's book instead of 1, played a game with her before bed, tucked her in with kisses and promises of tomorrow. And when he went to his own room, he didn't pour whiskey and stand at the window looking at his empire. Instead, he pulled out his phone and searched for Mandarin language classes in Seattle. It was a small step, but it felt like the right direction. Toward his daughter, toward understanding, toward becoming the kind of father who knew how to build bridges instead of walls. What scares her? What is Miss Lin like? What stories does she want to hear? How can I help? How can I be better? He saved the note, looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully in the dim glow of the nightlight. I'm sorry, he whispered to her in English, wishing he knew the words in Mandarin, wishing he'd kept the language his grandmother had tried to give him. I'm sorry I've been so far away. I'm going to try to come back. I promise I'm going to try. Emma didn't stir, but somewhere in the darkness of the room, Marcus felt a presence. Something gentle, something watching, something that might have been imagination or might have been something older. She held up a hand. Mr. Chun, she said calmly, I think we need to sit down and have a longer conversation about this. But I don't think we should do it in front of Emma right now. She's getting scared. Marcus looked at his daughter, who had indeed gone pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear or confusion or both. He checked his watch. 8:20. He was supposed to be at the office in 40 minutes for a meeting with investors that had been scheduled for 3 months. A meeting that could determine the next round of funding. A meeting that could make or break the company's expansion into Asian markets. But his daughter was standing in front of him, speaking a language he didn't know she could speak, talking about a mysterious woman who visited. Let's talk.